Hi, this is Divya Thalap and thanks for joining me. For today's project, I'm featuring products from Craftslane. I will leave links to all the supplies used today in the description box below. Make sure to check them out. These are new pattern papers that I've designed for Craftslane. They're called Peony Bazaar and they come in a pack of 3 sheets. These are 12 into 12 inches and 160 GSM in weight, which determines the thickness. I'll be working on 4 projects today to show you how these can be used. At the end of it, I'll be left with plenty of paper for a few more projects. So this pack is a real value for money. They're perfect for decoupage, scrapbooking, mixed media, card making and other paper crafts. To start off, I'm cutting the 2 white tags. I want to use one of these tags on a MDF hexagonal tray and one on the lid of a box. Once I've cut the tags out, I'm tearing off the edges. I don't want to use the paper as is because the cut leaves a sharp edge and that doesn't blend into the surface very well. I'm going to use a small piece of sandpaper and sand the edges. This will help the paper blend into the surface easily. I'm sanding the edges of the front and back of the paper. Remember to be gentle or the paper will start to tear off. Sand until you feel the edges are as thin as they can get. I'm painting the tray white with some acrylic paints using a sponge to do it. For gluing the paper down on the surface, I generally use acrylic gel medium or matte medium, Mod Podge by Heritage or Plaid. You could use any decoupage glue available in the market. I use gel or matte medium because they do a great job and they're also cheaper. I wanted to use the gel medium. I couldn't get the bottle open for this tray. So here you'll see me use Mod Podge by Heritage. And also didn't use it really well, so the paper didn't stick. I will be rectifying that in some time. You'll see. I'm also applying a coat of glue over the paper as well. If the glue is too less, the paper won't stick, and you could have air pockets. And if the glue is too much, it tends to warp. So the key to decoupage is the right amount of glue. I think you get a hang of it after a few projects. It's not rocket science. In this case, I've used less glue so the paper won't stick and I have air pockets. I'm using a hairdryer or a heat gun to apply some heat, reactivate the glue underneath and press the paper down. This will ensure that the paper is stuck flat to the surface, removes all bubbles or air pockets. My good friend Siddhi Jaguste showed me this trick and it's a lifesaver. Thanks, Sid. Alright, it still looks a little bumpy. That's because the white paint underneath is uneven, but that's okay. I am not going for a perfect look anyway. Once the paper is dry, I'm using some modeling paste with a palette knife to add some texture on the tray. I'll let this dry completely and add some color wash to it. a little later. For the color wash, I'm using the new Artist Paints by Craftslane. They come in various shades. I think they have about 18 or 20 shades on their site right now, and I'm planning to buy them all. They're really, really good. They have a fantastic coverage, and the consistency is just perfect for the kind of work I do. They also come in a wide mouth, so it's easier to get paint out or dip your brush in. So I love it. Um, do check them out. I will leave the link in the description box below, like I said. I'm using their baby pink and blush, and also a grey to match the metal bucket. I add some splatters in ink and grey to add some interest. Once that's dry, I'm using some acrylic paints with a sponge for the stencil. I've discovered that dabbing off excess paint on a piece of paper before stenciling gives you a cleaner impression. However, for this tray, I'm not looking for a perfect impression. As a final step, I'm adding a generous layer of wood varnish. I've not painted the bottom of the tray as I want to put this up on a wall as a wall piece. Remember, I had already added Mod Podge on the top of the paper, so it can on the paper, so it doesn't need Mod Podge now. You could directly just use a layer of wood varnish. So that's it. That finishes the first project. I put it aside to dry, and I'll start the second one. For the second project, I'm using Craftslane's MDF box. Craftslane has an option of buying products raw, their MDF products raw, primed, or even painted. I personally love the primed surfaces. They're really smooth and amazing to work with. So primed comes in a white, smooth white finish. They also have a ton of colors that you can pick from for a painted surface. So if you're a crafter or an artist who prefers a painted box, then that's a really good option for you. I'm measuring the top of the box. I'm making a note. This is a square box, so all the sides are equal, but these are also hand assembled, so sometimes there could be a minute difference in size. I always measure all the sides just to be sure. I cut the paper just slightly bigger than the surface. I will cut out the extra paper once it's glued down. I'm adhering the paper with some gel medium. I apply a generous amount of gel medium, place the paper in position, and press it down with the help of a clean tissue. I'm cutting off the extras and sanding the edges lightly. It's important to sand the edges. It gives you a cleaner more integrated look. I'm going to start painting the box now. I'm measuring the green strip so I can continue that on the sides of the box. I like how there's a green patch on the top, so I plan to continue it on the sides as well. I'm using baby pink and blush shades of pink that go perfectly with the paper set. I then paint the green side of the box as well. I'm leaving the inside of the box with white as it is. I like how it looks, so I'm just going to leave it. So that's about it. We're done with the project. I move on to the varnish and the sealing bit. I'm applying a coat of Mod Podge over the paper. I let it dry completely and then I apply a layer of wood varnish on all sides. I'm putting it aside to dry. Moving on to the third project, I'm using Craftslane's tiny rectangle tray. I'm going to use the leftover paper piece from the previous project. I measure the insides of the tray and I cut the paper. Again, I'll make sure to cut it bigger than the actual size and then chop off thin strips of paper and test to see if it fits perfectly. Since these are hand assembled, they are sometimes not a perfect rectangle, so it's difficult to just get the exact size in one go. So my advice is to cut the paper slightly bigger than what you've measured and chop off tiny strips and keep testing to see if it fits. Once I have the paper in the size I want, I'm painting the back, the sides, and about an inch on the inside of the tray as well. This way, when you stick the paper down, if the tray is showing slightly, you would see the paint instead of the MDF surface. I hope that's making sense. So if I'm painting pink on the sides, I want the pink to kind of continue on the inside of the tray as well. So by if any chance if the surface is peaking, then I don't see the brown or the MDF, I see the pink. I decided to choose just one shade of pink on this one. It's the baby pink paint, and I just love the shade. It's just so pretty. Once I've painted the back and the sides, I let it dry, and I'm going to use a coat of varnish to seal it right away. Since I won't be doing anything else to the sides or the back, a coat of varnish will keep it clean. I've noticed that with trays, I tend to get them dirty while working. Especially trays. I somehow do this with trays. I tend to dirty the back and the sides, so a coat of varnish will kind of keep it clean. Once that's dry, I'm using some gel medium to adhere the paper down to the surface. I keep a clean tissue handy to help me press the paper in place. I'm just going to press it down from one end and push the air bubbles out. I'm using the heat gun on areas that didn't stick properly. Heat it slightly and press it down. So once that's done, it's time to varnish. I'm using Mod Podge on the paper, a thin even coat. Once dry, I'll apply a coat of wood varnish on all the sides. Since I intend to use this as a tray, it will definitely come in contact with water and like other liquids. I'll be using 2 coats of wood varnish. This will ensure it's heat, water and dust resistant. So if I spill something, I could just quickly take a damp cloth and wipe it. It won't harm my surface. I set it aside to dry and work on the last project for the day. Remember the tag I cut out in the very beginning of the project? I'll be using that on the lid of this box. I'm using the big Peony's print on the sides and the lid of the box. I measure and cut the sides. I'm cutting exactly to size, but you could cut them slightly extra and chop off the extra bits like we did with the other projects. Oh, an important thing to remember here is to glue the paper on the opposite sides so it's easier to sand the edges. If you stick the papers on edges and sides, it will not give you a clean finish. I hope that makes sense. So always stick on 2 opposite sides, sand it down, and then stick the other 2 sides. I'm using gel medium again to adhere the paper and a clean tissue to press it down. I'm using a piece of sandpaper to sand the edges. Remember, sanding is essential to merge both your surfaces. So when you run your finger on the edge, you won't be able to tell where the paper ends and where the wood begins. I hope that's making sense again. After I've sanded the two sides, I'll adhere the paper on the other two remaining sides. I repeat the sanding on these as well. Now that that's done, I move on to painting. I paint the lid with a warm yellow, but you will see me change the color later in the video. I felt the yellow was a little too bright and didn't go with the overall look I was going for. I add some I've added some yellow splatters on the tag and move on to painting the insides and sides of the box with pink. I'm using a dry brush with some leftover pink on the edges of the paper. This will ensure that all of it comes together. I'm also adding a jute cord around the tag to add some interest. To match the white tag, I then decided to add white paint on the edges of the lid and the feet of the box. The sanded edges tend to pull off the print of the paper and leave the white edge. You could use distress inks to cover that. I sometimes do that, or you could just run a dry brush like I'm doing here with some paint along the edges to cover that up and bring everything together. I'm using a double-sided tape to stick the tag down. I wanted to add a little dimension to the whole thing. The leftover paper. I had some lovely green from the leftover paper, and I wanted to incorporate that on the lid, along with some old dictionary pages to match the brown of the jute cord. I tear off tiny bits and add it behind the white tag. Once I know where I want them all, I'm using some gel medium to stick them in place. Chubby fingers, hence the tweezers. As the final step, I'm adding Mod Podge wherever there's paper, leaving it to dry, and then adding a coat of wood varnish on all sides. Wood varnish on paper directly will yellow the paper in some time. It's not meant to be used on paper, so it won't have the properties that we're looking for. Mod Podge, however, has the archival qualities, so the paper will remain without yellowing or fading. Which is why I use Mod Podge on paper, I let it dry, and then use a coat of wood varnish on the entire project, including the paper bits. And that's it. That completes the projects for today. Here are some of the photographs of the completed projects. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I would love to hear your feedback. It helps me improve my content.